This morning, CNN announced that it is working to force the Fox News channel off the air and run this company out of business. A number of prominent Democrats, including office holders, support that effort. CNN staffers have already contacted the 6 major cable carriers in this country. Those are the companies that carry our signal into your home, and pressured them to drop Fox News. Why? On the pretext that this show is directly responsible for and others on the channel are directly responsible for the violence at the U.S. Capitol this week. It is time, CNN announced, quote, that TV carriers face questions for lending their platforms to dishonest companies that profit off of disinformation and conspiracy theories. So here you have a news company calling for censorship. You have a TV network demanding that media conglomerates ban its competitors. That's terrifying. But it's also, if we're being completely honest here, kind of amusing. Because you can just imagine CNN's blustery little dwarf king calling into his morning staff call yesterday. He spent a long night sitting on the tiny throne in his apartment, feet dangling just above the floor, watching Fox News and getting angrier and angrier. By the time he reaches his minions in the CNN newsroom to deliver the day's orders, the dwarf king's fleshy face is quivering like jello and crimson with rage. "Make them stop!" he screams. "Make them stop!" The minions jolt to attention. The first to her battle post is a former homecoming queen from Orange County who is eager to prove her chops. She's not a primetime anchor. She'd like to be, but she's still just a newsreader, a former co-host of a radio show on a contemporary hit station in Yakima, Washington, called Billy Blue and Brianna 2, The Morning Zoo. Not everyone takes her seriously. She wants to be taken seriously, and this is her chance. So she tries to remember the dwarf king's orders. Stop Fox! That was the main command. Then there was that stream of consciousness part, the part where the boss was breathing so heavily it was hard to make out the words. There was white supremacy, insurrection, domestic terrorism, something like that. She tries to connect the dots. It's confusing, but she's pretty sure the word insurrection was in there, for sure. Someone insurrected maybe, or acted insurrectingly, something like that. No, it was definitely insurrection. So she decides to look up the word in the dictionary to see what it means. Here's what happened next.
It was an insurrection. Take Merriam-Webster's word for it. Insurrection, an act or instance of revolting against civil authority or an established government, knocking down barriers, knocking down gates, pushing police out of the way. Police would be the civil authority as described in the definition of insurrection. They broke windows and doors. They vandalized offices.
Take Merriam-Webster's word for it. That's Mrs. Merriam-Webster to you. But here's the problem. This show, she explained, refused to call that obviously highly insurrection-y event an insurrection. We literally didn't use the word. Just refused. I mean, seriously. Who would do that? Well, if you really want to know who would do that, a white person would do that. A privileged white person. Someone who, presumably unlike her co-workers at CNN, and in fact the dwarf king himself, was both white and privileged, afflicted with something called white privilege. So much white privilege, in fact, that it blinded this person. Because that's the thing about white privilege. If you keep doing it, you go blind. That's what the boss said.
Tucker Carlson rolls his eyes at the idea of systemic racism, at white privilege, but perhaps he should roll those eyes on over to a mirror. It is entirely fantastical to think that crowds of black or brown Americans would have been treated as the mostly white insurrectionists at the Capitol were on Wednesday.
Oh, the moral lecture from the Morning Zoo lady. Perhaps he should roll his eyes on over to a mirror, assuming you can even do that when you've been blinded by white privilege, because blind people can't see themselves, right? But maybe they should see themselves. They might stop insurrecting, stop being so white and privileged. It went on like this for an entire segment. You can look it up on the internet. And in a way, that's the good news. With enemies like this, Fox News will be around for a long, long time.